Hey everyone, I'm Mark de Grasse, and you're listening to the AI Branding Podcast, where we talk about branding, marketing, content, and using AI to execute all three. So today I have a very special guest, Toby Brooks. He's actually a professor at Baylor, and I've had him on previous podcasts where we've actually talked about how he used short form content in the form of vertical videos to actually share key messages with his students. So we're going to be touching on that, and then also getting into some of the ethics that large institutions like Baylor are instituting for the use of AI, which is fantastic that you guys are doing that. So welcome, Toby.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Really appreciate the opportunity and love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And I love hearing everything that you're doing because I think, there's a lot of educators I've talked to that are frankly terrified of AI. Like, is it
Yeah,
going to take all the jobs away? Is it going to make, testing so difficult that it's useless? There's a lot of concerns, but I think you've really, kind of focused on the positives. So I thought we'd kind of touch on that today.
yeah, happy to do so.
Awesome. So why don't we just start with kind of, your view as an educator of, AI and how you're kind of using it in the classroom.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because we've been involved in discussions here where faculty have thought about, okay, this AI, it's revolutionary, no doubt about that. Should we add courses to the core curriculum and make it a central part of what we're doing? And the consensus was this is moving so quickly and it's being integrated so seamlessly that by the time you got that change pushed through, it would be like a word processing course for an undergrad. Like it's really not going to be a standalone thing for very much longer. We think it's really going to be woven into, and we see this even Box, which is like a file sharing service. There's now AI functionality that will allow it to search through your files and create a chat bot. Or uh, we see this with uh, Google and some of the Microsoft software where there's that little magic sparkly AI button that allows you to do things. So it's going to be really kind of woven into everything to the extent that we don't really feel like there will be a need for standalone AI training so much as just kind of the ethical conversation. At what point does it become plagiarism or cheating? At what point is it absolving myself from doing the fundamental part of my duty as a researcher? Can I just rely on AI to do all that for me? Or do I have an obligation to read through those things and summarize them for myself? So that's kind of the blue ocean, new frontier kind of way of implementing AI.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I love how it's not like a, rush into it because I think you have seen a few organizations that are coming out with like, oh, become an AI expert. And even with AI expert, even the term AI expert, I'm kind of like, I use it all the time. I'm not sure
Right.
I'm an expert in it because, like you said, it is changing so fast that even, trying to wrap your head around it is difficult, which is awesome that you guys are focusing on kind of, what's the implication of using AI versus like let's just use AI. Now in that regard, have you guys actually come up with kind of set standards for at least the professors and how to use it?
Yeah, there's a hesitancy to call it a policy because policies carry some weight with them. They have they're kind of slow moving entities, whereas guidelines can be agile. They can be crafted and changed from semester to semester. And so I think the top down approach, at least here and at my previous institution, was let's go away from creating a formal policy. We might have a statement that it should appear in a syllabus, and it's recommended that a faculty member uses that. Because the problem you run aground with is if a student uses it and I, as a faculty member, didn't specify how they could, or maybe if they're strictly forbidden, then you're kind of holding the student accountable to a law that was never really written. And
Mm.
so a lot of the questions are, okay, what is the institution as a whole saying we should abide by? And then to what extent does a professor or a faculty member have the ability to craft that for themselves? Because someone in business really needs to know how to use AI tools, whereas someone in the humanities, they don't want to use AI to summarize research. That's fundamental to their learning, and they need to do that for themselves. And so it's really not a one size fits all kind of prescription. So you have to be able to accommodate those different needs.
That makes total sense. And it's, like you said, it is getting woven into everything. And so, yeah, I always compare it to when the internet first started and everybody's like, oh, it's online. And it's like, yeah, everything's online.
Right.
We know.
Yeah.
And I think with
Nobody's
AI,
signing up. Yeah, no
okay.
one's signing up to become an expert in app creation. Like it's just with us. Everybody's got an app, and it's just kind of how you do business these days.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's really starting to use the technology right and democratizing programming, which is essentially what AI does. Like a lot of people like to think it's like this, well, general intelligence. Everybody just considers AI like, oh, it's a robot person, and instead it's like, no, it's just a much easier tool than trying to learn an entire language in order to create
Right.
the thing that you want. Now you just
Yeah.
say, here's the thing I want. Go for it.
Yeah. And for me personally, it's really just felt like a force multiplier. Like I know what I want to do, and I know how long it would take me to do some of these tasks, like to go through my podcast videos and pull out clips. Like I could do that, but I can use Opus and it'll do it in a click. Okay, well, that's one less thing I have to do. I can focus my efforts on creating new content. So it really does allow, especially people who are kind of bootstrapping startups, it really gives you the capability that would have taken 10 or 15 or how many ever people to do in the past.
Oh, that's a great point. And I love the specific uses of AI for tasks because you kind of have two sides of the spectrum when people think about AI. It's either going to do absolutely everything or it's going to do nothing useful. And I
Yeah,
think in the middle is basically like, no, look at your existing process. Which part of this would be ideal for AI to, accomplish for you? And then now your process just got way faster.
right.
So do you have other instances of, I think the podcast, kind of post-production is always helpful, but anything in like education or how are you using it?
Yeah, a lot of the strategies and tools and techniques that I'm starting to transition over into my classroom, I really discovered out of necessity from my podcast. And so using a tool like Descript, where you can edit things using a text editor instead of opening it up in like Premiere Pro and having to be some kind of expert on all things video production, it really kind of pulls that out, like you said, democratize it. It allows a lower entry point for someone that maybe doesn't have a ton of technical expertise. I used Script for a lot of editing. Decipher is another one that I use to create summaries. And in my estimation, as long as I'm creating the content, I can use that summary of my own content, and I feel pretty good about that. Whereas if I were to pull your video off the internet and then
Mm,
plug it in to Decipher and summarize it, that feels unethical to me. So
mm.
kind of weighing when is it okay to use these tools? Like if I'm using it to summarize my own work, I feel okay with that. And granted, there's some mistakes in it. It doesn't do a great job with names and spelling. Um, but it's a lot easier to edit an existing document than it is to start from scratch.
No, I love that. And that's usually the best or the safest way to approach it. Like, hey, let it get you, 50 to 90% of the way there. And then you do your human job, which is, look at the details and fix things and make sure that it resonates with whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Versus again, just putting it out there and it does. Because actually in regards to that, there is a application called Video, Vidyo,
Hmm.
and it does an okay job. Like you can upload an entire hour-long podcast and it'll actually pull like 20 or 30 sound bites out of it. But a lot of times when you actually look at it in the context of like, hey, I need to communicate something to my audience, you start to think like, man, how I don't even know what the heck we're talking about based on this clip.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how am I going to tweak
Opus
this?
does the same thing. So every podcaster has like a blurb intro that they read, and Opus always pulls that out as a clip for me. I'm like, no one needs to see that.
Yeah, what are you
That's
doing?
woven into everything. So I think it'll get better, but like you said, it's easier to take a starting point and tweak the knobs a little bit than it is to start from scratch and build it yourself.
Yeah, and that's well, and the other side of it that I actually use on the education front that I think is, pretty revolutionary for content creation, where it's basically like, hey, I used to just write articles and then you put out the article and you hope people take the tips and utilize it and do all this stuff. But really it puts a lot of the work onto the reader. But now, since we have AI, you could literally just take the article you wrote, put it into ChatGPT or Claude or wherever you want and say, hey, summarize a GPT or a custom application that could actually implement these tools for a user with minimal input. And then all of a sudden you have like essentially a wizard to help people execute the thing that you're trying to teach. And
Yeah.
that's been helpful.
That's one of the exciting things that I don't know how long Box has had it, but we just had access to it recently. Box Hubs. So Box is a shared file, cloud-based server, basically. So if I have all of my PowerPoints and lessons and everything associated with a class sitting essentially in a Box folder, I can create a hub for it. And then from that, AI will analyze it and then create a chatbot generator that could basically be like an online tutor. Hey, oh, I remember there being this Venn diagram in somewhere in the middle of the semester. With the appropriate prompt in my chatbot, it will take me to that or even kind of tutor me through where it was, why it matters in the context of the course, why that's important to an extent, almost like a tutor would have done in generations past, but it's only pulling from that course material. So you don't have to worry about the student getting confused. Well, this other textbook author said this and it contradicted that. So in terms of a particular class or prepping for an exam, you can use a tool like that. And it's almost like a deep dive into that specific course material.
I love that. Well, and that's really gets into the kind of dynamic learning that would make AI so much more capable, where it's even like you said, a Venn diagram, where it's like you try to explain that to some people, even just staring at it, like people don't really understand what it means. And
Yeah,
so you don't have to be the dunce cap student that's having to ask the question and maybe be embarrassed, which nobody should be embarrassed about asking questions if they
right.
don't understand anything, but we are. But instead, you could just go to this unbiased, the program doesn't care about you or
Yeah,
judge you. Ask all the dumb
yeah.
questions you want.
In that regard, I feel like it really opens the door for disparate learners because, like you said, that there may be that talkative member extrovert who answers every question the professor poses, and the quiet student sitting back that would like some further information. This allows them to do that in a way that maybe fits their learning style a little bit better.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because I mean, even for me, personally, I am an introvert. A lot of people don't believe that, but I am. And I grew up extremely shy and insecure. And one of the people who would get nervous talking to like a, steward, let's say a server or a cashier, where it was just like, oh no, what if I say something wrong? And I was definitely like that in school too, where it was like, you know what, I don't get this, but it's not worth the hassle and discomfort of trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But even in that regards, I think it really takes a shift in your thinking. Like, hey, I don't need to restrict myself to intelligent sounding questions or restrict myself to, I need to have this level of understanding before I feel it's appropriate to ask a question. And I think that's huge for students.
And sometimes you really don't form the right question until you've had a chance to wrestle with the information a little bit. Once your grasp of some information starts to get a little bit deeper, you might be outside of class and reviewing your notes, and you're like, "Oh, well, that makes more sense now."
Mm.
But the professor isn't there, and so pardon me, one of the things we're seeing a lot of is that lessons get recorded. So yeah, you sit in class and you take notes and you do that. But a lot of this is asynchronous, and whether it's a brick and mortar class where you can go back and review the recordings later, or it's all online and you view it whenever you want in the dosage that you just deem as appropriate for that day. The fact of the matter is, you don't have to be sitting in that classroom for 1 hour, 3 times a week in order to ask that question. You can literally ask it anytime you want. And it allows you to kind of learn on your own terms much more flexibly than generations in the past probably could have.
We have an amazing limited time offer that you won't want to miss. Introducing the Build Your Brand Pillars course from AI Branding Academy, your gateway to mastering both traditional branding and AI-powered marketing strategies. With this course, you'll gain invaluable skills in creating strong brand foundations that stand out in today's competitive market. Perfect for innovation leaders like you. Don't wait. Take advantage of this special offer before it's gone. Head to aibranding.academy.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because just thinking of like, how would I use this to learn a lesson? You could, go at the reading level that you like. You could
Mhm.
contextualize it using something you're interested in, like, baseball, if that's what you want, and you're trying to learn a subject that you don't understand, put it in terms of baseball, and then all of a sudden it all makes sense. And then also just, planning your schedule for studies. Like if you said, hey, this is a tough topic for me. I want to make sure that I understand it, but I need to do it in small doses. So I only want a 10-minute lesson once a day for the next 3 weeks to understand this topic. And it can do that.
Yeah. And I won't speak for other disciplines, but I come from the health professions, and a lot of those have certification exams,
Mm.
and same thing's true in finance and business. If you want to be uh, a lawyer, obviously there's a bar exam. So these high stakes tests, one of the things historically people have done is they buy these practice exams, and it's got 100 or 12. My wife's studying for a counseling exam. She bought a resource that had 1,200 questions in it, and that's one of the ways you prep for the test. Well, if you've got a passage from a class of notes or a text, then you can use the appropriate prompt and it will craft sample questions for you. And sometimes they're completely wrong, but that's a valuable study tool. Like, okay, I don't think that's right. I'm going to go back and reference. More often than not, they're pretty good. And I've used that as a study tool for students as well. Use ChatGPT to create 20 practice exam
Mm.
questions and then trade with a classmate and see if you can appropriately, accurately answer those questions. And then, the test is coming next week and you've already had a stab at 20 or 40 or 60 or how many ever practice exam questions that were scripted in completely by AI.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, and it'll give people a much better understanding in general without, having to literally make anything up or even
Mm.
try that hard, which I
Yeah,
think is the,
right.
because if you think of like, oh, I'm going to put flashcards together, you still got to sit down and write the flashcards or even type them out. And it's still work,
Yeah,
versus this, where it's like, a prompt that you can write in about 30 seconds. Now,
yeah.
with all that said, because you mentioned exams, which I'm guessing is a big, topic of discussion, how do you restrict the students from using AI during exams to just spit out an answer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's really kind of two flavors of that. The traditional brick and mortar proctored exam still lives on. And so a lot of my faculty colleagues, myself included, will use something called Lockdown Browser that it's a web-based exam, but once you log in, you're not able to navigate out of that browser to search the web. And so it essentially turns your device into a single purpose only test center.
Okay.
And until you submit that exam, you're locked in and all you can do is see you're interfacing with the exam and the exam alone. That's fairly easy and fairly low tech. And I'm going to be in the classroom anyway. I'll make labs and make sure people don't have technical concerns, things like that. But that's typically how brick and mortar classes are ensuring that students aren't cheating. Now, online or synchronous or asynchronous classes, that's much more difficult. There are proctoring services that will essentially you log in and it will turn on your laptop's camera and your microphone, and you basically have to scan the room. When I was doing my MBA, every time I logged in for a test, sometimes the approval process will take you 5 minutes before you actually get in so that you can take your exam. And some of those are more intricate than others. Um, some involve multiple cameras that you have to have set up so that it can see in front of you and behind you just to make sure you're not cheating. And but like the criminals make the best police.
Innovators.
I mean, there are services available, and we've even kind of taken a deep dive. There's lots of whether it's Reddit extreme. There are lots of ways to try to circumvent the security measures. So if we have a chance to test in person, that's kind of the best approach. Apart from that, you have to police it pretty tightly. And then another approach people are taking is, and this probably fits some professions better than others, is this tool is going to exist when you have a job. If you're in business and you're going to use an AI tool to help you generate a pitch deck for a potential investor, then why would we prevent or forbid you from doing that as a student? And so instead of, being the no police, it is we're still gonna test you, and you can use these tools, but can you use them in a way that produces something that still meets standards? And so that's a much more challenging question. And frankly, that's a lot harder test to write as opposed to just saying you can't use it. We're going to make sure you don't use it. And so that's kind of the new frontier of assessment is really kind of rethinking what's the purpose of a test. In my generation, you studied and you regurgitated, and that proved whether you knew it or not. And increasingly, that's really not as valuable of a skill as it used to be, because we know the answers are at our fingertips. Can you curate those responses, make sense of them, and then produce something new of value? And that's a much deeper question.
Yeah, but AI might be the solution for that too. Because if you said like, hey, we're testing your understanding and ability to apply a concept, then you're basically going to present that. And if it's lame, we're going to know. And if it's a good idea, we're going to know too, based on the parameters that you give. But no, I think that's man, that's complicated I think the actual outcome of it could be, hey, we actually do have people who now understand and what we've always wanted, which is they can innovate on what they've learned and actually create something new. In that regards, do you think there'll be any, comeback of like live presentations, like, hey, we need you to get up front and recite this or deliver it?
Yeah, great question. And as much as I would love to say yes, because from my perspective, it's easier, in the name of access and in the name of inclusivity, that's really not the model of higher education anymore. If you look at all the growth areas, it's been online in education. I did an MBA at Louisiana State, Shreveport, and I've never set foot on campus. And I've got a master's degree from there. Everything was done online. We did group projects, virtual, meet via Zoom, present to the professor. It was a recording that we uploaded so that he would grade it. So all the growth is occurring kind of offline. And one of the beauties of that model is you don't need to build new buildings to double or triple or quadruple. Half the student population at LSU Shreveport is in the MBA program. They have 5,000 resident students and 5,000 students in their MBA. Wow. So they've doubled their enrollment. And to my knowledge, they haven't built one new building to accommodate that. They've got distance-based faculty. So the economics says that we can bring in a lot more tuition dollars. We can distribute our faculty so we don't have to build offices or research suites for them. And we don't have to have all this expensive computer equipment and everything else for students because they're expected to bring their own. So the economics of it makes a lot of sense for smaller institutions that might be struggling with enrollment otherwise, because they can enroll a student anywhere they have an internet connection.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And that's really been the barrier for the most part. Of course, some of those buildings I think are just because alumni like to give money and put their name on crap.
Well, you're in Austin, and Waco's the same thing. All the prettiest things around here have a name slapped on them.
Yep. No, that's you get a tax write-off and something to walk by. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess.
Yep.
Now, in regards to jobs, though, because I'm sure you get that question a lot from your students, massive layoffs occurring right now, a lot within the white collar and administrative and a lot of the jobs that I think colleges were preparing students for, which is that kind of like corporate admin position. Do you think AI is going to replace a lot of that? And if so, what are people going to do?
I think it's definitely changing the landscape of the job market, but there will always be jobs for creative people that can apply tools in new ways. And I've heard folks in our business college, they say, we can't forbid the use of AI because we're going to graduate students who have little to no, usable skills in the business marketplace of 2024. So it's easy. Like I said, the test in class that I proctor is easier, but that doesn't mean that it's relevant for a graduate to be who's going to enter the workforce and be expected to know how to use prompts to answer questions and build pitch decks and do the things associated with their job. So yeah, I mean, we were talking about this the other day. I was driving through downtown in our old town of Lubbock, and we saw an old parking guard shack, and it's dilapidated and it's falling in on itself. And I'm like, you realize how many jobs aren't jobs anymore in our society? Like elevator operator and parking lot attendants, and to a certain extent, like even Airbnb or Uber versus cabs. Like that's just society evolves and it changes, and there are going to be some positions that probably don't exist a generation from now. But there will also, I mean, you're a podcaster. When you were 10 years old, did you say, I want to be a podcaster? No, because it wasn't a career option, right? So as this changes and as things kind of down-regulate or dwindle away, new opportunities are being created because of this technology. So that's really the problem in higher ed, is it's a slow-moving machine. And, to create a new degree in prompt engineering might take 3 years to happen. And by then it's not relevant anymore. So the speed of the change is the big kind of barrier or rate limiter for a lot of institutions. But those that do it well are going to be at the forefront. It's easier to stay ahead than it is to try to catch up and get ahead.
No, that's a great point, because I think it's, I mean, like we started at the beginning of this, where it's going to be woven into everything. So literally you could just figure out how to make whatever position you were thinking about having way more efficient, and then find out if it's even something you want to do in the first place, which
Right.
I think is one of the biggest benefits of AI, where you can explore this from an intellectual standpoint, whether you would be good for that profession without talking to anybody. You just kind of query it. And like you said too, the new jobs are going to come up, and I love the podcasting example because that's such a good point. And just from a career standpoint, because like I said, I've always been super introverted and I still don't really have a desire for any attention at all. But that doesn't stop me from doing the thing I need to do and learning the skills to do it, because it's necessary.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. I think it gives people a real insight into kind of how higher ed is utilizing AI. I think it's a very progressive approach. I think, where it's not like, hey, we're gonna bend down the hatches and make sure that we keep this monster out, and using some practical approaches instead.
Yeah. No, the slower we move or the more resistance we have to change, the further behind we get with every passing day. And so you can either get on board or try to catch up, or it's just like with podcasting. I wanted to launch a podcast 5 years ago. And a year and a half ago, I finally did it. And with that, you're like, boy, I wish I would have started 5 years ago, but I'm glad I didn't start last month. Like the entry point really doesn't matter. Just get in, go with it, because you can't make up for the decision you didn't make a year ago, but you can make up for the decision you haven't made a year from now.
Oh, that's a great point too, because I think it's I mean, the thing is, you don't know how it's going to go until you try it. And then once you get over that scary part, just like using AI, podcasting, website creation, marketing, whatever it is, then you realize like, oh, it's actually way simpler than you thought it was. It's just work, and there's no trick to get out of that, even with AI.
Yeah. And I try to tell faculty all the time, if you're not actively pursuing this, your students are. And with every incoming class, they're more and more comfortable with these tools. They use them, they rely on them on a daily basis. And at some point, you're going to be completely irrelevant, because they're going to know way more about these tools and these approaches than you do. And you're not going to have any credibility in their mind. Like this is a dinosaur that hasn't kept up with the times, versus someone who's actively trying to curate and pull out, okay, this tool might work well in this class. This tool might work well in this class. I think it imbues some credibility, and students see that authenticity, and they connect with you better than they would if unless, I'm using old sloppy PowerPoints from 1980, 1995, whatever, or worse, the old overhead projector acetates that people used to use.
Some people still use those. I've actually
Yeah.
seen the device in the classrooms. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Well, that's fantastic. I think you have a great approach, great mindset for it. The only addition I would say to, get on the AI train if you want to keep up with trends is get on TikTok before it potentially goes away, because
Yeah.
that's the way I stay up with everything. And
Yeah.
and especially with kids, I have a 11 and a 12-year-old, so they're on the weird language part of growing up where I don't understand what they're saying half the time, but now I do because
Yeah.
I'm on TikTok and
Right.
a Connor Price concert, so I'm
There you
super
go. And that's that relevance question. Like, dad's cool. Like,
good.
he cares enough to figure out what in the world I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I think our generation of parenting is totally different than the older one, because I'm like, yeah, man, he knows what's up. He's
Yeah.
out there. I'll listen to. I do it for fashion advice too. I'm like, he looks good, so just tell me.
Absolutely.
I'll get the 5-inch inseam shorts, and I'm set.
I haven't gone there. I can't. I grew up the Fab Five era, the baggy basketball shorts. Sorry, son.
Oh,
He's
it
trying to
was
get me to
hard.
wear. Yeah,
But now, well, that's the funniest part is now I see like kids wearing cargo shorts and cargo pants. I'm like,
it's
I wore that in junior high and high school. Like, what's happening right now?
yeah, it's all
Uh,
circular.
Good for us though. We don't have
Yeah,
to.
absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Toby. This has been a ton of fun. Love your insights. Love the kind of sight for the future that you have and the institutes that you work for. Where can people learn more about you?
So I'm at Baylor University at the Academy for Teaching and Learning, and I also have a podcast of my own called Becoming Undone. Just wrapping up a 9-10 part series on Larry Johnson of 90s NBA fame, and quite a trip down memory lane there. But interview high achievers. You've been a guest. I appreciate that. Where we talk about how setbacks and adversity can be the absolute most important thing on our steps towards success. So looking at how I can change an unfinished goal into some unfinished growth. And so would love to have people check that out. But we'll definitely tap you on the shoulder and get you involved. You are an expert in the AI space, and lots of faculty members have questions. And I think we're turning to our colleagues and our friends in the business world that have embraced these quickly, because you've got some chops, you've got some experience that shows how AI can be useful in your business, and a little slower moving at our universities.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's, I love being on the forefront, but even for me, like, I feel like I'm behind half the time because I'm like, I'm not going to use any tool until I know it's established enough that it's not going to be a waste of time to learn it. So
Yeah,
I'm a slow mover ish on the front end, but anytime you guys need anything, I'm always happy to talk. That's what I do now.
awesome. Well, I'm just up the road, so we'll have to connect again.
Definitely. We'll do that soon.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Toby. And thank you for listening. This has been the AI Branding Podcast, where we talk everything branding, marketing, content, and AI. If you want more content like this, please subscribe.